that you may have as well. So during the presentation, please post your questions into the Q&A tab, and we'll answer as many as we go through this. And then also for everyone in the audience, we do have 2 ways for you to engage. So on your screen to the right, again, the primary source of questions will come from the Q&A tab, and you can also upvote questions that you want answered. So if there's some questions that have a lot of upvotes, we'll try to get to those first. And now I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Hi everyone, as Winnie mentioned, I'm Jen T with Aringo, and I'm super excited today to talk to you about Ross MBA and the application process, specifically diving into the essays themselves. And as Winnie said, we did have some volunteers share their actual essays for Ross this year, so we've kind of gone through them and kind of dissected them a little bit, and we'll give you some advice to help you kind of hear a little bit about what other people have thought. So just so you know, I am with Aringo, and so we are an MBA admissions consulting firm. So if you are looking for help for crafting your essays, working on your strategy, we're here to help you through that entire process. We've been around for about 20 years. Personally, I've been in admissions for 10 years, and so really know what these schools are looking for in an applicant and how we can help you really showcase what you have as far as your experience and what the school is looking for, and show those intersections and parallels. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm sharing my screen. And so sometimes I'll be looking down and as we go through this. So if you see me, I'm really just trying to make sure I'm following along really well. But if you have questions, Winnie's going to moderate for us, and Winnie will keep time for us too, and kind of keep me on track, because I get excited when we talk about this. And so she'll make sure that we don't run out of time. All right, so here we go. So first, I wanted to kind of talk about a few things that are going to be important when you are thinking about your essays. So the admissions committee, they have heard so much from so many people about what they think an admissions committee wants to hear. They honestly want to hear authentically from you. So, don't write what you think an admissions committee would want to hear. Like, I've had a lot of people that I've talked to over the past week even that have said, oh, I'm going to pitch consulting because that's like a typical role versus what I want to do and be a product manager. And I was like, what? Like, there's actually so many more roles for product managers than there are for MBB consultants as far as, getting admitted from the MBA program. So, let's talk about your authenticity and make sure that you're really presenting who you are. And the admissions committee is going to see that and really feel like, wow, this is the right person for us. The other thing is to do your research. So, the website is a great start. Go to the events that they host, but then also connect with students and alumni. You're going to get a lot more qualitative information from those experiences versus just trying to quickly put things together on your own and think of what you think is important. But this is going to give you the opportunity to actually, decide, why is Ross an important school for me? Why am I even applying? And then you want to think about the direction that the admissions committee is thinking about your application as they're reviewing it. So they're going to be looking for your academic readiness. They're going to be looking at your leadership potential, your employment and recruitment alignment. So, are they going to be able to help you get a job? And then they're also going to be looking at your personal qualities and contributions. Like, how are you going to be a contributing member of their community? And then you always want to answer the question that the essay is answering. So a lot of the times people get wrapped up in telling this story, and then at the end, the admissions committee is kind of like, cool story, but what did that mean? Like, you didn't answer my question. So we want to make sure we do that. And then the bigger thing is that a lot of our consultants will do for our clients when they first start, first initial drafts, is kind of like, you told me this story, but so what? What's the importance? And so again, kind of going back to, did the message land with your audience? Did they get what you were talking about? And then when you're in doubt, you can always use the STAR method, looking at, how do I break this down as far as the situation, what I needed to do, the action that I took, what the results were, and then how I learned from it. So being able to kind of put that on paper is sometimes the easiest first draft of an essay. All right, so now that we've got the basics out of the way, let's jump into Ross. And if there's any specific questions, again, feel free to ask them as we kind of go along. Winnie will be our moderator. Okay, so the first question for Ross is centered around how will this learning environment benefit you and how do you plan to contribute to action-based learning experience? So if I took that at surface level, I might say, oh, like I don't know, but read the context of the actual prompt. So at Michegan Ross, we believe that the best way to learn is by doing. In our full-time MBA program, you will put your skills and knowledge to the test in real-world situations with real stakes. So real is the theme that Ross MBA really kind of harps on, is that they're talking about real experiences. And so they want you to talk about how you learn in the moment, and action-based learning. So think about this application, and how it applies to you, an application of learning, not the application process itself. So think about how they decide to learn, like versus like case study method, etc. They're really putting you in the mix, and that's their whole goal. So they have a lot of information on their website about the different options that you'll have to choose from for crafting your curriculum. So real start. So if you want to be like an entrepreneur, real advice for consulting, real invest for the finance side, and real lead for management studies. So with all of these things, you want to talk about how this learning environment is going to specifically, impact you. And so that's how you're going to answer the question of, not only do you want to learn that way, but you also can contribute to it by maybe a previous example that you've had. Like sometimes you've learned on the fly, and it could be not something you were successful at, right? Like schools are okay with you talking about failure. It's not a job application or a job interview, like where they're like, how successful have you been? No, the admissions committees like wanting to know about what you've learned over the past, 4 to 5 years of your work experience. So how will this learning environment benefit you, and how do you plan to contribute? So I have an essay that was shared by a GMAT Club member. And so I've done my best to kind of try to give it to, like, it's so hard to share an essay in one of these presentations, but I've tried to give you kind of the snippet. So hopefully everybody can kind of read over it on your own. But to give you the gist, this client, they kind of put us into the seat of telling us that they were working in, or they were walking through a manufacturing client's production floor, and they were hearing about some issues that the client was facing. And even though it wasn't their specific role to address it, they really felt like, I think I have a compelling answer for it. So they jumped in, came up with a plan, presented it, and were able to implement it and help with increasing the production efficiency that they were missing out on. And so this was their practical experience and what they wanted to be able to share, of like, I have this experience of, jumping in and learning on the fly, and I want to be able to share this experience with my cohort because I have this experience in manufacturing and working with clients and being able to help them essentially increase the bottom line. So, this is a great example of being able to show that experience. And if you have this, whether it's professional, personal, or academically, right? Like you can show any of those kind of experiences that you've had. You can share that in this essay. So it doesn't always have to be professional, but if you can show them an example of how you've been able to learn on the fly and be able to apply that knowledge, and then what you're going to be able to share with your cohort from that experience, that's what they're looking for. So the other thing that the client did in this is that they also kind of shared their conversations with some current students. So Robin and Prince Harry. Now, I wanted to kind of Google this and be like, does Prince Harry actually go to Ross? I don't think so. But so they did speak with some current students, which is great, right? You want to show that. And you also want to show what you learned as it relates to you and your goals and your ambitions for this school. And so they talked about learning about the MAP program, or the multidisciplinary action plan that Ross has. And so they were talking about how this is going to help them with that next step in their skills development and refinement. And so, think about this. You don't need an exact scenario that's going to be the same as what this person shared here, but think about it in your way of what have you learned, how have you applied your action-based learning thus far, or maybe it's been the absence of, right? Like you can say, like, I really enjoyed it when I was in college, but I've been missing it on the job, and this is something that I'm looking forward to getting whenever I join Rocks. And then you can talk about what you've learned from either webinars or talking to current students, or even alumni. If you work with alumni, that's even cooler, to see how they've been applying that action-based learning throughout their work experience as well. So this is an example of this essay. And then you can see Mark, who is one of our fantastic editors, he kind of gave them some additional prompts of, how do we continue to add value and conciseness and a little bit of crispness to this essay. And so for him, he felt like the way that this person jumped into the proposal was a little bit vague. So maybe talking about, like how they got to that point, instead of just starting from there. So then they also talked about, like, how are you going to share, or what are you going to share from this experience, right? Like, so yes, you're going to share, like, I've had this experience, but what are you going to share with them? Like, I've had this experience of working side by side with with a specific production team, or with the VPs, or even the people, the production like the production people on the floor. So having that experience is something really unique. And so again, what are you going to do? What are you going to contribute? What are you going to share? It doesn't just need to be like this overall experience, but diving in to show those unique moments that not everybody else has had, that you can bring to the table whenever you guys are jumping into your action-based learning. Okay. And the other thing that this person had shared in their essay is that they're looking forward to sharing their experiences. Again, that was a little vague, and engaging with my peers in the consulting club, which is great. So you mentioned something that is on the social side of the school, but then also joining in case competitions and workshops. So this is a great opportunity. Again, like, consulting club and case competitions are pretty generic. So maybe think about specific ones that you're interested in, and kudos or double points if they're ones that only happen at Ross, or is like a Ross specific event. That will be helpful. Okay, so do we have any questions about this essay, Winnie, that we need to start addressing?
Yeah, so we do have a few questions. One of them is kind of related to what you were saying about the name. So, what impact does it create if we write the name of current students in our essays?
So without a doubt, there is kind of like this mental association that's going to happen when you mention a student name, right? And so if they're like, oh, they spoke with Winnie, and so Winnie has all these really great attributes, they're going to mentally draw a parallel between the two of you because you've had a connection. And so now you're associating yourself with somebody else who's been successful in the program. And so that will be helpful. Plus, mentioning the actual name of the student gives them the authenticity of, like, not just like I spoke to students, but like that I spoke to, and if you feel like it's name dropping, it's not. What it is giving them relative, like, context clues of, like, if you said you wanted to join the consulting club and you talked to Prince Harry, who was part of the consulting club, then fantastic. Like, that draws a parallel for me and says, like, okay, you've really done your research.
Thank you. And then there is another question. So, while answering how I will contribute to school, should it be centered around my strengths or the things that I am going to do at school?
Both. Okay, so if your strength is that you are a good team builder, right? Like, that's something that you're going to help foster throughout the program, and that's what we're going to like to hear about. you can also talk about the things, right? Like you can pair those together. Like I'm a really great team builder, and I have an I have a knack for easily building rapport with others, and I feel like I'm going to use this as part of the oh my gosh, I want to think about it immediately. But there's like a student government association for every single business club is like MBA association is what it's typically called. And so if you wanted to be the president of that, you're connected with everybody, or just joining MBA as like a, board member could give you that ability to work across the board and work with everybody, not just people from a specific sector or kind of like career goal.
Thank you. Then there's another question that's asking, what do you mean by contribute to the action-based learning? Does that mean in the classes? And can you give any examples for this?
Yeah. So if we took the example from this specific experience, right? Like this person has experience working in the manufacturing side of things. And so in your action-based learning class, you may be deployed, since this is Ross, maybe to the automotive industry, and you may be working with a client that you've never worked in the automotive or manufacturing world. And so this person that wrote this essay, is going to be able to share their specific insight while you're on site working for this client, right? So they're going to have some direct applications, and you're going to be able to help give them perspective and understanding. And so now going back out, 10,000 feet, think about how that works for you. What specific experience have you had? If you're an accountant and you've been consulting on specific accounting projects and stuff like that, and then you guys go on site and work for an accounting firm or somebody who needs accounting or something like that, you have this niche experience that you can share with the folks that are also, on the ground, because no matter what, you're not always going to be in a situation that you're familiar with. And so hopefully somebody from your team will have some sort of experience to share with it. Or maybe your experience is that I do really well adjusting to any environment. Here's an example of this, and here's how I've been able to foster, getting to know the client or the team really well. And this is how I plan to do that with my team when we're assigned to a new environment.
Thank you. And there's another question asking, is the contribution to the school by joining school clubs and activities compelling and significant enough? Since I guess the majority of the students will probably state that one.
I think that it's a relevant one, right? Because they want to know, how are you going to join in and be part of the Ross community, and how do you feel like you can best give back? So if it's through, this through a club, then I think that's kind of the easier way to be able to narrow it down to something more specific. Let's say that you are really involved in community and the community around you and education, and you want to do something within the Ann Arbor educational sector, and you want to do mentoring, then you could be part of like a social service activity or club that's, all about being immersed in the local community, and that's something that you have an experience in. Now, the other side of this is that you can also mention about, like, if you have a lot of travel experience and you've worked with across different cultures, you can talk about that as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be the student clubs, it just tends to be the easier one. And I would say, like, to not feel so generic about it, is that you pick clubs that are a little bit more significant to Ross than like the consulting club or the marketing club, right? Like, so pick something that's a little bit more special, that has to do with Ross specifically, beyond, just something that every school will have.
Great, thank you. And there's another question that's how to draft a long-term plan. And she did elaborate a little bit, saying that she struggles to write a long-term plan sometimes. So are there any tips you can give to help in writing a good long-term plan?
Yeah. So the biggest thing about a long-term plan is it doesn't have to be as specific as your short-term plan. It needs to be connected though. right? Like I think that that's something that I always talk to clients about, is that you need to build a thread, right? Like even though maybe you want to pivot to a completely different industry, think about those transferable skills that you've learned from what you've done already, right? Like I want to take my experience working within manufacturing and be able to move into the startup arena, and I want to apply what I've learned from big business and big companies and be able to take that and figure out how to translate that for startups, right? Like you're being able to draw this comparison. And then, so now I want to go into startups short term. But in the long term, I see myself moving into either being like having my own startup or even like my own consulting firm as it relates to startups, specifically about raising capital, right? Like, so you can kind of put it together so it's a little bit of a building block, and so that the committee can kind of see like, okay, so we have a lot of stuff that we can use from the previous career that are transferable skills to right now for this immediate career goal, and that career goal builds to eventually get you to that long-term goal. And the biggest connector of all of them is the MBA program and the curriculum that specifically is at Ross or whatever school it might be.
Great, thank you. And we do have some more questions, but Jen, I just wanted to make sure you get through everything that
Yeah.
you would say first, so we can answer the questions later if that's better for you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the next question essay for Ross is: Ross is proud to support community of leaders and impact makers. As a future member of this community, we want to know more about who you are and what drives you. Please choose one of the following prompts to tell us more about what makes you stand out beyond the academic and work experience. List the prompt you are answering at the top of this response. So one, that's very key. Follow the directions. If you don't do that, then that's telling them, maybe that you don't follow directions or you don't pay attention to details whenever you maybe say, that's one of my biggest skills is that I pay attention to detail, but you skipped part of the prompt. So, okay, so the next thing is deciding which one of these adventures you want to choose. What makes you unique? Can you provide a specific example of how you've overcome a personal challenge? What makes you excited to get up each morning? And describe a time when you made a difference in your community or with an individual. So you can choose any of these prompts. It doesn't matter what you decide. My expertise says find something that you can share. Pick a prompt that shares something different about you that they haven't already learned from your resume, from your essay, or that you can dive deeper on from your resume. But you want to share a new experience with them. So that's always the goal, is each essay shares something different and isn't repetitive. So without further ado, so here is the essay that was shared with us. And it's about an important contribution that somebody made to the community. And so for them, they were talking about being able to help with financial literacy and empowering entrepreneurs. And so they organized a series of sessions to help entrepreneurs in their local community with learning about the financial side of things. And then they drew out a specific example of a bakery owner who was struggling, and they were able to help make an impact directly on them. And that was something that helped them with contributing to their community and making a meaningful difference. And underscored the importance of accessibility in education and fostering economic resilience. So this is their example. Again, you can read this or take a screenshot of it if you really want to reference it later. But, a couple of things to make this really sing is by sharing a little bit more about, like, one thing is that it said, I'm working with young people and small business owners in my local community. And Mark was like, kind of like, make it even better by sharing what that community is. And so, sometimes there's microcosms of like I live in like Little Italy of my town or city, or I live in a community. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, it can be, if there's anything further to give them more details, or it can even be like my local community in Brooklyn, or Park Slope or whatever it might be, like being able to refine it just a little bit so that the reader is kind of like, oh, I get an idea where you're at. Beyond that, it was kind of like, I organized a series of sessions. So what kind of sessions were these? Not necessarily just about financial literacy, but give us some more insight to what you did. And then you can also talk about how it was organized. How did you get the word out about it? Did you collaborate with maybe the local small business owners association within the town, those types of things? So there's some ways to kind of hit a little bit more deep and give them some more detail and paint a more vivid picture for them. And then the last part of this whole comment was it would be nice to say how you might bring this idea back to the Ross community. So, like saying that, this is something you'd be interested in doing in the Ann Arbor community and reaching out to small business or entrepreneurs. Okay, any questions on that, Winnie?
Yeah, so there are some questions, a couple of them actually, pretty similar. I'll put them on the stage. How would someone looking for a career shift post MBA write a great essay?
I think that telling them the reason, right? Like, so if you're like, I've been an accountant for the past 3 or 4 years, really working on the financials and giving the report to somebody else, but I want to be the one implementing these changes. So I want to move into industry and I want to be part of making these financial changes and helping my company that I'm part of for a long term actually make this turnaround and be part of the solution and move into the future, right? So you just need to be able to paint the picture of why you're compelled to make this career shift. What sparked this interest if you've been somewhere else for a while? What is it that makes you want to move to the other side? And then the better part of it is how their MBA specifically is relevant to making this shift.
Thank you. And then there's another question. Can this essay be from an experience I had when I was doing my undergrad?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say that like I always recommend going back too far, but I think that this is an opportunity for you to share maybe even the trickle down effect of what happened when you were an undergrad and how you're able to make this happen. Maybe it repeated itself after your undergrad during your professional experience, and then again, something you want to do at Ross. Um, but yeah, I think that there's no time period that's untouchable. I just, make sure that you're not touching back to college too much. Just one example from college is good, but not too much that's like, you're always going back to something so far away. What have you learned recently?
And then another question is, can you guide a little bit on what makes you unique question? Should I highlight my strengths with anecdotes? Can you give any examples?
Yeah. So I think that it really depends, right? Like, so I'm trying to think about unique experiences. So I've always been interested in starting my own business. From when I was a little kid, I had my own, I mean, this is like super late, but lemonade stand. And I, went around the neighborhood and tried to sell my lemonade. And so this sparked this interest in me that, I always wanted to be the person on the cutting edge and doing something on my own. And this has, kind of fostered these experiences I've had throughout my life. When I was working within this specific company, I was always looking to do something new. And now I want to do it on my own. So I don't know. Now I just made that into a career essay, but I think that you can talk about, something that's specific about you that is exciting. Or, I mean, like, I think it could even be, if unique doesn't always have to necessarily be something super positive, right? Like, so if you had a rough girl, like background when you were growing up, that's something, like unique about me is that I grew up in a like with a single mom and I was able to learn about resilience and these different characteristics that I saw her and I was able to emulate them on my own and now this is something that I bring with me everywhere I go.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll let you move on to the next part. And we do have some more questions, but we can save those for later.
Okay, thanks, Winnie. You're great. Okay, so the last part is what is your short-term career goal and how will Ross help you achieve it? So this goes back to the research. So Ross sets everything up for you, right? Like, so they talk about all of the ways that they help people with getting to their end goal, of getting to the specific short-term goal. So they have the career action days, recruiting prep courses, coaching on search strategy, etc. So you can see these listed out. Then, each school kind of has their own specializations, concentrations, majors, whatever they might be. Ross has them outlined. So, like, if you want a career in finance, here are the typical companies that are hiring, here are the typical roles that people are getting in afterwards. And so they've kind of laid out some pretty common roles that you could land after graduating from Ross. And so they've kind of lined it up for you. So, like, you could even, I mean, I think that this is a little bit hard to show. I'm sorry. I was trying to do a little bit of screenshot here to share it, but like, after I graduate, I'd like to work for a company like BlackRock, working on the financial planning side. You can kind of decide, how this best fits you, but you can kind of mix and match as to what makes sense for the specific company, community, etc. that you want to work in. And then there's some pretty common outcomes as far as career positions or roles, and that's really easy way to put together your short-term career goal for Ross is, they give you a lot of resources. You can say, I can't wait for the recruiting prep courses so that I can learn how this new industry recruits, or anything that might be helpful, or even from the MAP program, right? Like, you can reference different parts of Ross that are going to help you with that next step. Okay, so that's the short-term goal. I know that was pretty fast, but I will go on to just a couple more things. So the only other things that I wanted to share before we kind of wrap up for Q&A is, there's going to be some other essays, whether they're related specifically to Ross or not, just to kind of know in general, is that there might be a question about additional information, which is typically not an additional essay. So if they say additional information, it means, hey, like, is there anything else for context that we need to know about you? A lot of the times, like, if you're a first gen college student, you might have a bit more of a rough start to your undergrad year. So you can share that, as a first gen college student, you can see that I had a little bit of a rough entry and my GPA was low, but you can see that it's on an upward trajectory as I complete my upper level coursework and degree. And I hope that you can see this, or something like that, right? Like, you can give them that additional information. Optional essay is another place where they might get some information like that as well. So optional essay is technically also not an essay. So it is a way where you can say, I have a few things I want to share with the committee. 1, my GPA might be low. 2, you'll see a work gap from this time to this time. Because of COVID, there were layoffs in my industry, and it took a while to find a job during COVID. Or if you're going to be reapplying to the school, this is an important part, is that if you're reapplying, don't submit the application that didn't get you in last year. A lot of people ask me, like, do I really need to do anything? Yeah, you do. The committee is going to say, you didn't get in last year with this essay or this application. Why would you resubmit it? So you need to tell them what's different. So, you need to update your resume. Maybe your career goals have shifted, or you need to enhance that essay and give them more plausibility as to where you're wanting to go and some reassurance that you can get there. And then with a reapplication essay, you're going to give them some pretty pointed key moments of, like, these are the things that have changed since the last time I applied, and I'm still, interested in Ross specifically because of X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm reapplying. Okay, so that was my last kind of slide. Now we're up for Q&A. My contact information is here, as well as a link to my Calendly. If you want to set up a time for a profile evaluation, you can do so here in that link.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. So let me show on stage. If your short-term goal is to start a venture, is that a disadvantage?
No, it's an advantage, right? Like, because you can kind of, I would say that it's an advantage because you have a more pointed point of view. So to say of like, I want to start my venture in because. So you have even more stakes involved in this, and that you can give more resource as to how you're going to help build this experience so that you're successful when you graduate. And I would say that you could also say that, if I mean, there's not a lot of room in the essay or the application itself, but having that open mind of like, if it doesn't happen, here's my backup plan, and being able to kind of know that not everybody gets to launch immediately after their MBA, and there might be a moment where you have to decide, hey, I need a little bit more experience before I go out on my own, and this is what I want to do. But there's not a disadvantage for that as long as you show why you want to do it, how you're going to do it, and why the program is relevant.
Okay, thank you. And then this is an interesting question. Is adding a bit of Hollywood touch to your essay a good idea? Like adding references from popular movies, does that make your essay seem childish?
I'm not sure I like would understand. I'm not sure I understand exactly how you would incorporate that. Um, I would say maybe you can do it once in an essay, but not keep on referring back to it. That would be my initial response without seeing something. If it feels gimmicky, then it might be gimmicky or hokey or something like that. So, if it really is authentically you and like who you are, always spouting off movie quotes, then maybe it works for you. But I would say, like, if it feels something forced, then maybe skip it and see what you can get to when you take those things away.
Mhm. Another question is, can it be more sophisticated than just name dropping current students and alumni? Can I write about what the students are working on and how I want to work in the same field, maybe?
Absolutely. That's the best way to reference it, right? And I think that these are first drafts of essays that we referenced, but it would be great if they said like I connected with Prince Harry and Prince Harry mentioned how the MAP program really helped him realize X, Y, and Z, and that's something I'm really excited about. So yes, absolutely. Make it more sophisticated than just name dropping. Add the context to it and why it's important to you or relevant to you.
And for this question, for someone pivoting into consulting, how specific do they have to be regarding the short term goal? Should I mention even the industries I want to work at the consulting firm? Or since hiring happens for generous roles, does the industry not need to be required?
I think that this is helpful for bringing in like why you would be a good candidate for consulting, especially if you're referencing MBB. Like, what specific industry or experience do you have that you're bringing in? And so it can be as simple as, um, this isn't the right phrasing, but something like utilizing my experience from X, Y, and Z. I want to move into consulting to be at a firm like to be able to help startups on a daily basis or something like that, right? So it doesn't have to be super in depth. You can say a firm like and use two or three, but I always recommend that you be humble and know that not everybody gets into an MBB and be open to tier one, tier two, like consulting firms. And so maybe adding in a Deloitte or an EY, Parthenon, depending on what you're interested in, to be able to say like, I know that not everybody's going to make it. I want to, but I'm open to other options.
Thank you. Then this is for the optional essay. Can we write on more than one subject in the optional essay section, like low GPA, low GMAT score, and gap year?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I like to do it is I have three things I want to share with the admissions committee about my application. Boom, boom, boom. They don't need to be essays in themselves. You just want to say, you'll notice that my GPA was lower because of this is what I learned. You'll notice that my GMAT score is low. However, I want you to take X, Y, and Z in account, or this is what I've done to combat that. MBA math, other prep courses, etc. And then I had a gap year because of X, Y, and Z, or not X, Y, and Z, but like something exciting, hopefully. So if any of that falls into that realm, then absolutely use the optional essay for it.
Thank you. And this question, I think, is about one of the prior essays you were talking about earlier. Is the main objective of this whole question to ask about personality, or do I have to tie up to also show professional and academic capability?
I think that's the like tell us more about you and pick one of these questions, I think. And so it's not necessarily any of this. What it is how are you going to be a good fit for Rocks in the end? By you telling us what is unique about you and experience that you've had, it says like this is how I can fit into the community because you've been able to do your research and inferred what it is about you that makes you a good fit for them. So it doesn't have to be any of these specific things. It doesn't have to be all or none. It could be all or it could be all of it. So, it's more about how are you a good fit for our community? And this is your opportunity to share that with us.
This question asks, how can someone who wants to start their own venture properly justify the reason for MBA?
I think everybody can do that. Right? Like, because if you want to start your own venture, there's going to be parts of your experience that you're lacking. And that can be, I've had people who tried to have a startup during college or immediately after and they failed. And it was because what I found out really quickly is that I didn't have the marketing skills that I needed. I had the technical skills, but not the marketing skills or the financial skills or whatever it might be. You're ultimately probably going to be lacking something. And so you want to fill the gaps, one, with your MBA for the foundational courses and the electives or the concentrations, but then also you might find a business partner in your MBA program too. So that's something you can even reference to is that, I'm looking to fill these gaps with coursework and potentially finding a co-founder.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, as someone who is currently working as an engineer from the mining industry, what do you think are the specific points I need to emphasize in my essays? Is it technicalities, people managing skills, or both?
All of it, right? Like you're in a highly specialized field, right? Like mining is something completely different from what most people have been doing in tech or finance or something like that. And it's a good thing, right? Like you're bringing something different to the table, specifically to Russ in a manufacturing heavy kind of environment. You have something interesting to bring in that you can share. And so you want to talk about, the technicalities of the field, right? Like that you had to meet specific requirements, specifications, safety, etc. But then, you've had to manage people at the same time. So being able to lead a team of X, Y, and Z to execute something that was dangerous, right? Like if you're on the tech side, danger is not lurking around the corner in every moment. But if you're in manufacturing or in like mining, there is like an element of safety that's there. And so you can talk about that danger and like having to mitigate it or, crisis situations and solving them. I've had a lot of people who have actually been an engineer on a ship, and like that's kind of one of the coolest moments is to share like these crisis management experiences, like when it was like an engine blew, there was a hurricane, and there were pirates trying to, get on our ship and steal our stuff. So like you can bring all of those elements into the application, and it really stands out.
Perfect, thank you. So that will be the last question. Thank you everyone so much for attending. There are some more questions. I know Jen said there's a link if you want to, meet up with her later. So feel free to do that. And yeah, again, thank you everyone for attending. Jen will be at the booth at the end of the session, so feel free to see her there and ask her questions there as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Winnie.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.